My name is years ago when he met Trisha. Trisha, 34, is an Instagram influencer. Her life revolves around photographing herself in expensive clothes for her 47,000 followers, endlessly obsessing over her brand. Still, you want your kid to be happy. So 4 years ago, I transferred the right to live in my 3-bedroom house on Cedar Hill Drive to them, rent-free. Call it a father's instinct, but I kept the deed in my name. Since then, the calls faded. 18 months ago, the invitations to visit stopped entirely. "We're just so busy with work, Dad," Dennis would say. That's why I was surprised when my phone rang on the morning of June 3rd. Dennis skipped the greetings entirely. "Hey, Dad, got a favor to ask," he said. "Trisha and I are heading to Hawaii for 10 days. The house is a disaster and we want it deep cleaned while we're gone. Attic included. Would you mind hiring someone? We'll reimburse you." In 18 months, they couldn't spare 2 hours for a visit, but now they needed me to play property manager. I should have said no, but I agreed. I called Rosa Martinez, a former social work colleague who had started a cleaning business, and handed her my spare key. The next morning, I let Rosa in. The house was a sterile gray and white showroom plastered with photos of Dennis and Trisha's perfect child-free life. I left her to it and drove back to my downtown operations. In the far corner sat an old wooden closet, entirely out of place. The crying was coming from inside. My hands shook as I opened the door. Inside was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, terribly thin, her dark hair tangled and dirty. She was wearing a stained pink t-shirt and shorts that were far too small. Behind her lay a thin mattress, some plastic plates with dried food residue, and a half-empty water bottle. She pressed herself into the corner, looking at me with huge, terrified eyes. "My son's house, my son's attic, my son's secret." I crouched down, making myself small. "Hey there, my name is Elmer. I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" Are you the cleaning lady's friend?" she whispered. "Yes, Rosa heard you crying. It's okay. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophie," she said, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. "My daddy, Dennis, brought me here. He said I have to stay hidden up here because I'm not supposed to be here." The cold spreading through my chest turned to ice. My granddaughter, kept like a shameful secret in a dark closet. "Sophie," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm Dennis's father. That makes me your grandfather, and I promise you, you are not staying in this attic anymore." I carried her downstairs. She weighed practically nothing. Rosa had already dialed 911. The police and the Department of Human Services, DHS, arrived in minutes. The caseworker, Linda Chen, recognized me immediately. "Elmer, what are you doing here?" "This is my son's house," I said, the words tasting like ash. "That's my granddaughter. I didn't know she existed until an hour ago." At the hospital, the horrifying picture became clear. Sophie's mother had died of cancer 2 years ago. Dennis was granted full custody and received $1,200 a month in child support for her care. "Check his banking records," I told Linda, my old training taking the wheel. "I'll bet you find withdrawals matching his personal expenses." The doctors confirmed Sophie was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from prolonged isolation. As she slept in her hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, a cold, calculated rage built in my bones. Dennis thought he could hide his cruelty behind perfect Instagram photos. His biggest mistake wasn't hiring the cleaning lady. His biggest mistake was forgetting who his father was. I went home, pulled my retired DHS badge out of a box, and opened my laptop. It was time to build a case. By the next morning, I had applied for emergency kinship care. By the afternoon, I had hired Charlotte Webb, a ruthless family law attorney. "What we're looking at is a strong case for neglect, possibly criminal," Charlotte told me in her glass-walled office. "But Dennis is her legal father. We need to build a case so airtight no judge could rule in his favor." "I know how to document a neglect case," I replied. "Let's subpoena his bank records. I want everything." Sophie came home with me that evening. All her worldly possessions fit in a single plastic grocery bag. When she saw my apartment, she walked carefully, terrified of making noise. "Trisha said I ruined everything by existing," Sophie whispered later that night. My fists clenched, but I kept my voice soft. "Not a borrowed car, Dennis," I said coldly. "And no, I'm not giving her back to the people who kept her in an attic. But do come home. The authorities would love to speak with you." That evening, Dennis and Trisha pounded on my apartment door. I opened it with the chain on. Trisha was standing behind him, recording on her phone, already trying to spin a narrative for her followers. "I have rights," Dennis yelled. "You forfeited your rights when you locked a child in an attic for 8 months while you posted vacation photos," I shot back. "I've got hospital records, police reports, and soon I'll have—" Dennis's lawyer tried to claim the attic was just a temporary arrangement during a home renovation. Charlotte stood up and systematically dismantled them. She presented the medical reports proving severe malnourishment. She submitted witness statements from 3 neighbors who swore they hadn't seen a child at the house in 8 months. Finally, she dropped the hammer, a forensic accounting spreadsheet I had built. Every month, Mr. Stanley deposits $1,200 for Sophie's care, Charlotte announced to the courtroom, and every month, that money is spent on Hawaiian vacations, high-end restaurants, and designer clothing. He has been financially exploiting his daughter while keeping her imprisoned. Tricia burst into fake tears. We were going to make her a beautiful room. His father is manipulating everything because he hates me. Judge Pierce stared her down. Mrs. Stanley, sit down. A closet with a dirty mattress and a single light bulb is not a renovation. The judge granted me temporary guardianship, issued a no-contact order against Dennis and Tricia, and referred the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. As we left the courthouse, Tricia hissed at me. You've ruined our lives, old man. Your life was ruined the moment you decided a child was disposable, I replied. I just made sure everyone could see it. Child neglect in the first degree and financial exploitation of a minor. The local news picked up the story, splashing Dennis's corporate headshot and Tricia's curated Instagram face next to the grim details of the police report. The fallout was absolute. Dennis was fired from his tech job within 3 days. Tricia's sponsors dropped her immediately, and her follower count plummeted. They were publicly ruined. Facing overwhelming evidence, their lawyer urged them to take a plea deal. They would plead guilty to avoid a drawn-out trial, but they were still looking at jail time. Meanwhile, Sophie was slowly coming back to life. She started kindergarten. She made friends. The night terrors began to fade. We baked cookies and went to the park. For the first time in years, she was allowed to just be a child. The sentencing hearing arrived in mid-September. The courtroom was packed with reporters. Dennis and Tricia sat at the defense table, stripped of their vanity, looking terrified. I was called to give the victim impact statement. I walked to the podium and looked tight. But despite everything they did, Sophie is surviving, I continued. She is learning to trust, to laugh, and to make friends. The best thing that ever happened to her was being taken away from them. And the best thing for her future is ensuring they face real consequences. Judge Pierce didn't hold back. What you did was systematic, calculated, and cruel, she told them. Mr. Stanley, you are sentenced to 30 months in state prison. Furthermore, your parental rights are terminated permanently. Dennis gasped, his legs giving out slightly. Mrs. Stanley, you are sentenced to 24 months. You are both ordered to repay the stolen $28,800 into a trust for the child. The gavel cracked. The bailiffs moved in with handcuffs. As Dennis was led away, he looked back at me, desperate. Dad, please, I'm your son. You were my son, I said. Now you're just the man who abused my granddaughter. A month later, my permanent guardianship became official. I sold the Cedar Hill Drive house, the house I had given them, for a massive profit, and put every single penny into an ironclad trust fund for Sophie's future. Dennis had stolen from his daughter to fund his lifestyle. I used their former home to secure her future. Our life now is beautifully ordinary. My once quiet apartment is filled with crayons, dinosaur backpacks, and the sound of a little girl's laughter. One evening at the park, after watching her go down the slide for the 20th time, I sat on a bench while the autumn sun set over Portland. Somewhere in a county jail, Tricia was sitting in a cell. Somewhere in a state prison, Dennis was finally facing reality. I'd spent my entire career fighting for children I didn't know. Turns out, the most important fight of my life was for the one I did. Justice isn't always swift, and it isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a grandfather and a granddaughter building a beautiful life from the wreckage. And that is more than enough.